This is Harry Judd for Boxing Social in partnership with Empire Fight Store. Delighted to be once again joined by Andy Clarke. Going to be a bit different this sort of chat, going away from sort of the news and current affairs that are currently happening within boxing. Let's recap on the year, Andy. It's been a year of ups and downs. We've had the Queen's passing, the Conor Benn saga, Shields Marshall, the return of small hall boxing, and Lee Eaton shows at York Hall, and Callum Sowland shows at York Hall, and then Kieran Farrell shows at Bolton. So it's been a year of ups and downs, Andy.
Yeah, we never have a dull year, do we? And you're always wondering what this year would be like, because it was the first one where finally we seem to be kind of COVID free. Although this time last year, Omicron, I'd forgotten that word, Omicron kind of reared its head. And it was the weekend that's just gone where loads of people got COVID working in our industry, didn't they? I know everybody seemed to get it that weekend. I was in Kiev and I managed not to get it. I was at a K2 show, and that in itself is kind of an example of things that then went on to happen that I would never have expected away from a global pandemic. I was thinking I might be over in Ukraine doing 5 or 6 things this year for K2. And then, of course, Russia invaded Ukraine, which at that point, I think they knew was kind of inevitable, but the rest of us in further west had maybe just assumed wouldn't happen. And things like that are happening in the world at the moment, which, you know, puts your own kinds of struggles into perspective. But it does have a knock-on effect sometimes on what you do. And I guess that did to a small extent with me. And it just makes you think. Boxing is never dull, but at the minute particularly, I think just the whole of the world is in this kind of state of flux, and it does transmit itself to boxing, which just makes for a more interesting cocktail than normal. And you listed a few of the things that have happened this year, and yeah, there's been a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a few of these now, and a lot of people are more disappointed than uplifted by this year. Would you carry the same sentiment?
I could see where they're coming from, because some things have happened that haven't been great for the sport, which hasn't really cast us in a great light. I mean, you think really about the situation with Conor Benn, because that was big. It's still big. It hit the national press. They took a real interest in it. They weren't of a mind to kind of let it go either, which is good, because these things shouldn't be let go. It's a serious situation. It didn't exactly look like it was handled all that well when some facts emerged, and we still don't really have many. It looked like the whole thing was kind of covered up, or there was an attempted cover up. And as soon as anyone gets a whiff of that in their nostrils, then they know that they've got a story. It was always going to be a story, whatever happened, but it just becomes that bit more appealing to all kinds of media, basically. So I think when people look at the year and if they're a bit disappointed with it, I think that's probably the main reason why. I think other than that, there was a lot of, there was a lot of good stuff we had. What didn't happen?
Fights that didn't happen, would that be another reason why people are upset, perhaps?
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think that Fury Joshua, for example, if we just take that one, I just don't think that was ever really that realistic, to be honest, with the time frame attached to it. What I always kind of thought about that one, I'm not some kind of doom monger, so when they seemed to be talking, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, let's be optimistic. Maybe this can happen. But at the back of my mind, what I really thought happened there was that Tyson just took a free swing, thinking I can say, yeah, come on, let's fight in December, knowing that he can't, that it'll be basically impossible. He'll then have to kind of just say no, and I've got a nice easy win, and I can abuse him for that forever. But Anthony Joshua then kind of called his bluff, and I think he did it knowing that the whole thing wasn't going to happen. But then you had a situation where they're kind of forced into almost pretending like it can happen, although they all knew that it couldn't really, and in the end it didn't. But yeah, fights that don't happen is always something that people will tend to concentrate on, maybe a bit more than they should. But that's the only real big one which looked like it might happen and then didn't. And I think that was part of the reason why Fury Chisora got the criticism that it did, was because it wasn't Fury Joshua. But Fury Joshua wouldn't have been in the UK. Let's not forget that. That would have been in Saudi Arabia. There's no point fooling ourselves there.
Yeah, well, you spoke not on your recent podcast, but the podcast before about Fury Chisora. But there has been some really good fights this year. I mean, it's hard to really figure that. Yeah, we had Taylor Cattrall this year. We had Khan Brook this year. Obviously, Shields, Marshall. Lee Wood Collins seems to be the fight when I ask people what their fight of the year's been. Lee Wood Collins always the one that everyone's picked. But what would your fight of the year be? I can imagine you picking something obscure.
So, well, I did. I did a kind of list
in Bolton or something like that. Where
I did. I thought about all of this about a week ago because I've done a few of these, and I don't deliberately pick something off beat. But what I generally do is I'll generally try and pick answers which have some,
meaning.
Which are not personal necessarily, but fights I was at, basically fights I've covered and fighters I've covered. And so my fight of the year, the fight I enjoyed most from ringside, was Linus Adofa against Denzel Bentley. That was a brilliant fight.
Yes.
On Channel 5 at the Indigo at the O2. I really, really enjoyed that. It just ticked all boxes. There was a good atmosphere. They both had plenty of supporters there. They're two really good fighters, two really good lads. British title on the line. Just a brilliant advert for everything that we really love. I mean, Lee Wood against Michael Conlan was absolutely extraordinary, and on a kind of global level, if you like, because it was a world title fight. That is a bigger fight, and I can understand why people would pick that. And if I was asked to pick a list where I take my own kind of personal opinion and all the rest of it out of it and just pick on the grounds of what was the most significant and what was the highest level, then it is that one. I would agree that it is that one. Same for kind of fighter of the year. I was asked about that, and I've gone for Natasha Jonas because commentated on her last fight. Yeah, 3 world title fights, 3 world title wins in the space of a calendar year at super welterweight. That's pretty amazing. But globally, it is Dimitri Bivol. It is, isn't it? But you don't want to always give the same answers as everybody else. And Linus Adofa, Denzel Bentley, I think it's a solid choice because it was a brilliant fight. It was an absolutely brilliant fight. And yeah, ringside for that was terrific.
You've been at so many fights this year. Are you happy with the schedule? It seems that boxing's been just non-stop. The back half of this year, it seems that there's boxing every single weekend and multiple shows.
Yeah, it is fairly hectic. I mean, for me, it's worked out fine. I don't know how easy it would be if you're trying to cover everything like you guys and others. It would put a strain on resources. I think at the start of, we're going back a while now, probably the start of the previous season when Matchroom and DAZN, their partnership was new. Boxer and Sky, their partnership was new. Obviously, Queensberry and BT were established and have been going for a while. But people seem to make the effort at that point not to clash. I don't know if I'm kind of misremembering, but I seem to remember that there was an effort to not go on the same weekend, basically. And then that kind of stopped this year, from what I remember. People would announce, and then someone else would just announce for the same night. And then at the end of November, we had a scenario where it looked like for a while, all 3 of them were going to have shows in London on the same night. And then Wasserman had one on the Friday as well. But Sky moved to the Sunday, which I think was a good move. And I guess it's kind of inevitable, really, because you've got a lot of coverage of boxing these days, which is great. But it's not ideal, is it? It's not ideal. And I think the small hall scene, which has reemerged in good, robust fashion. I've been to a few of them, which is great to see, obviously. I don't think it really affects them that much because they've got quite a loyal following, a loyal, more local crowd. So what's going on at the kind of higher TV end, if you like, I don't think it really would damage their attendances. Other things can do, obviously, like the World Cup and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely been busy. That's for sure. It's been very, very busy.
And this year we haven't seen a resolution in terms of the Olympic boxing ban. That's obviously been a big talking point this year as well.
Yeah, so that is a very interesting situation. So I was in Abu Dhabi a couple of weekends ago, and I've been keeping my eye on this. Obviously, I haven't done that much stuff for AIBA this year. Last year we did a lot. Me and Big Ron McIntosh, we went to all sorts: European under-22s, European juniors, everything really. At the start of the year, I went to the Strangia tournament, and it looked like we were going to be doing a lot again. But again, I think the Russia-Ukraine war had a bearing on that, because AIBA is sponsored by Gazprom, and it's largely a Russian organization in terms of who runs it. Bagumar Kremlev's Russian, and most of the staff are. And we didn't end up going to much apart from the final stages of the Women's World Championship. So I didn't have an awful lot of kind of intel on the whole situation. And I was pretty down about it, to be honest. I didn't really see a resolution to it. I'm more optimistic now off the back of a couple of conversations I had a couple of weeks ago that something can be done, because as I understand it, the IOC do want boxing. They just need somebody to come in and take charge of organising the qualifying, because the IOC did that themselves for the last Olympics. They're doing it for Paris. They don't really want to do that. They feel like they shouldn't have to do that, which of course they shouldn't. They don't seem to be really interested in AIBA's involvement. So somebody else needs to come in and do that. I think that is a possibility. I think that can be done. I don't know exactly who would be getting together with whom to do that. But where there is a will, there's a way. And the IOC do want boxing, and Los Angeles want boxing, because, you know, it's a pretty big sport in the city. You know, think about Oscar De La Hoya. You know, what a big name he is and has been for a long time. So I'm actually more optimistic now about that than I have been for quite some time. There are things that need to be accomplished yet, but I think it could happen. I think it could happen. And if it did, it would just be it'd be such a relief, because it really would be terrible if boxing got dropped from the Olympics. It would be disastrous, really.
I think one of the good things that has come out of amateur boxing in this country as well is, I know you keep on tabs with the team, so do I, is the success of Team England. I'd say in overseas competitions, I think they've done extraordinarily well. Once again, team of the tournaments, etc. I think they've done fantastic this year.
Yeah, they've done really well. Yeah, I love talking about this, because no one really asks me about it particularly, but I try and kind of like shoehorn it into shows I'm commentating on, and if there's just some kind of like amateur angle and something's been going on. But yeah, they've had a really good year. All England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland as well. They boxed as Northern Ireland in the Commonwealth, but not for anything else. It was like when they went to the World Championships, the Men's World Championships last year, late last year, October, November time, straight off the back of an Olympics, which never normally happens, obviously. It was hard work. You know, they struggled. Reece Lynch got a medal for Scotland, but nobody else did. And it's a difficult competition to medal in anyway. But you could see that jump, that leap from being, say, like the number 2 fighter to the number 1 fighter, because basically everybody post Tokyo turned professional or left the system. You could see that it was proving difficult to handle. But this year they've done really, really well, because European Championships, they stepped up, did really well, won a number of medals. People who underperformed at the World Championships did exactly the opposite. The Women's European Championships, again, everybody did well. Ireland did really well in that. They were the top team. I went to the final stages of the Women's Worlds. Ireland got a couple of gold medals in the space of 15 minutes. And one of their fighters, actually, Amy Broadhurst, won gold at the Europeans, World Championships, and Commonwealth Games all in the same year, in about 6 or 7 months. So they've been amazing. The Irish women's team have been absolutely sensational. But then the European Youths went well. The European Juniors went well. Yeah. The World Youth Championships went well. It's been a brilliant year, actually. A really, really good year. It'll be interesting to see if they can really kick on with that in the big World Championships that are coming up next year. So the Women's World Championships, they go again next year. They're bringing them into line, so they're both in the same year. That's in New Delhi in India in March or April. They haven't put a final date on that yet. The men's is in Tashkent in Uzbekistan, first 2 weeks of May. That's going to be brilliant. You know, they'll get crowds there almost every day. I'm pretty sure that the likes of Bakadir Jalolov are going to box there because they doubled the prize fund for men and women. So it's 200 grand now, 200 US dollars for a gold, 100 for a silver, 50 for a bronze. And this AIBA Pro series that I was at the other week, you know, all these things are going on with AIBA where they're making it as attractive as they can to kind of keep fighters, not necessarily exclusively to them, but just say to them, listen, you can box pro and keep doing this. And why wouldn't you? Because, you know, this is what's on offer. So I think that World Championships will be spectacular. I'm very much hoping to get out to it myself. And, you know, if I were you, I would be trying to convince, see how they go, maybe, or see if you can get out for the later stages, because you get to meet and see all of these fighters, and they love it. You know, they really appreciate it when they see a kind of a face from home over there. And those tournaments are just brilliant. I can't explain really just how good they are. The standard is so good, and you see these teams from all over the world, and yeah, I love it.
Forget as well, Birmingham 2022.
Yeah, of course, Commonwealth Games. That was another riotous success. It really was.
Again, fantastic year. I forget, you know, that's obviously the sort of summer of this year. We had an amazing tournament in Birmingham. Fantastic for Team England again. Yeah,
multi-sport tournaments are always great too, because it gives them that feel of what it would be like to go to an Olympics, where you're all kind of in the village and the athletes from different sports knocking around all over the place, and you've got that kind of atmosphere to it.
And boxing on BBC iPlayer and boxing in front of the home fans. You forget that, you know, these world championships and European championships are done abroad and mostly get broadcasted on YouTube. But to box in Birmingham, and I know many of the team have got to do multiple pieces of content with the team, we're just excited to box in front of family again.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about the Commonwealth Games, is that in terms of the profile, it's second to the Olympics. In terms of how hard it is to win a medal, it would be below the Olympics, below the World Championships, below the Continental Championships. I'll probably put it fourth, I think. But it's covered by the BBC. So, like you say, you're boxing on free-to-air, via the red button maybe, or wherever you have to go to get it. It's not complicated. And there'll be highlights on the main channel. So it really does build fighters' profiles, and it's really, really important for them. And that's, you know, it's a great showcase. And it's just another reason why, you know, the boxing just desperately needs to stay in the Olympics, because they just get great eyeballs on them through the Olympics. We generally do pretty well. And it just means that all this other stuff that's going on, we could have a situation where we go from being despairing because we think everything's over to being in a better position than ever before. Because, as I said, AIBA are beefing up their program and their prize money and their athlete treatment and all this other stuff that they're working on, to the point where that will be better than it's ever been before. If alongside that, we can just manage to keep the Olympics, and the two things can coexist perfectly fine, because they're not going to say, oh, well, if you box in our competitions, you can't go and qualify for the Olympics. I mean, that would be absolutely absurd. We could have a scenario where being an elite international amateur boxer is better than it's ever been.
Moving swiftly on as well, other than obviously the work you do freelance with Sky and etc., the podcast Macklin's Take, it's probably got my favourite opening theme song, I'd say, for any podcast. It's fantastic. Just reflection on that, because you do a whole host of topics. We will go into your last episode with, you know, the Border Control General Secretary Robert Smith, but just going on an overall sense of how that's gone this year with Matthew.
Yeah, good. So we had a long break. We did one with Dan Aziz kind of this time last year, early December, just after he'd become British champion, I think. And then we left it for a while because there were things, you know, there were things going on. We were trying to work out how we might be able to take it to the next, not to the next level necessarily, but recording it became a bit more difficult, because at that point I kind of stepped away from Sky. So I wasn't seeing Matt at fight weeks every other week, where we would kind of like get 2 or 3 in the bag. That's how we've generally done it. And we never intended to stay away quite so long, but in the end, we got back in kind of September time, because we just really missed doing it. And I just love doing it. It's so much fun, and you just get a real broad range of people on it. You know, fight week for Shields Marshall, we've got Savannah, got Alicia Baumgartner. There's no one in boxing who's really out of reach, particularly with Zoom now. But for us, it's not really about getting the biggest names possible, although, you know, we do get them from time to time. We did a couple with Ambrose Mendy around that women's card. And they're the ones that we absolutely love because Ambrose has just got incredible stories. But maybe because the boxing audience aren't as familiar with him as they used to be, he doesn't really get asked for them that much anymore, which is a shame because that was great fun. And anyone really, you know, anyone we bump into, you know, you basically go to a weigh-in or a press conference and you just have a quick scout around. That's how we do it. We do have a rough plan, but a lot of the time we'll kind of just arrive, have a look around and think, oh, okay, yeah, they'd be good.
I certainly remember you in the initial Shields Marshall fight week in the hotel with Peter Fury.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Yeah. Peter Fury's great. And you know that you can just, you know, you can sit down at the drop of a hat almost because, you know, we're in boxing full time. We don't really need to go away and do any prep necessarily. And then you just kind of think on your feet as to what you're going to talk about. And Peter's a bit of a favorite because, you know, he's a straight talker, but, you know, you get plenty of people who are straight talkers who just talk nonsense because, you know, I like what I say and I say what I like and all that kind of thing, but he speaks absolute sense. And yeah, he's always a good one. We've got a really good one lined up with Spencer Oliver that we've been meaning to do for ages, basically about his 24 years in the boxing media. He's the longest serving member that I can think of on the kind of pundit side. And yeah, he's got plenty of stories. It's just which ones he decides he's able to tell.
Yeah, he certainly gives everyone his time. That's what I really appreciate about Spencer. I mean, saying that though, I've been trying to get in contact with him through a Zoom. So if he is watching this, then, you know, hopefully he can answer my text back. But one of the topics you spoke about in your last podcast was about the different platforms. And I think this year, more than anyone, I don't know about you, obviously being in the media yourself, the surge of digital media now out there that are covering boxing is just astronomical, and how to find boxing, different platforms and, you know, social media. And I spoke to Dave Colwell about this and social media being such a big part of it. And he says, you know, if you're a talented boxer and you don't have the social media following or you know, you're attentive on social media, you're not going to hit those big heights. So with a streaming service like DAZN, you've got BT, Sky, Boxer doing fantastically well, and etc. Are you surprised that DAZN hasn't done or is not as successful? Yeah, with that being said,
I think it was always going to be very difficult, and the reason being that DAZN don't really have any means of advertising other than going down the really expensive route, which they've done, to be fair to them, a good few times of, you know, buying up space in Piccadilly Circus and stuff like that, and hitting the national publications, because for them there isn't all that much point kind of advertising in say boxing news, because whoever buys boxing news, like, will buy boxing news, and we've got DAZN. You know, you're preaching to the choir, and that's kind of the problem with it, really, or one of the problems you would have from a marketing point of view. And they'll have a lot of people working on that, you know, obviously a lot more about that than I do. But just because it's an easy problem to identify, it doesn't mean it's an easy problem to solve. Whereas obviously the benefit that Sky have got, apart from the fact that they've been around for 30 years, is that they can cross promote and big up their boxing on all sorts of other channels and platforms. And BT can do it to an extent. They can advertise their upcoming fight night on their Champions League coverage, obviously, which they do quite often, and the Premier League coverage, which gets a lot of eyeballs. And DAZN don't have that. And that's the battle they've got at the moment. And I guess as a business, their aim would be to get some bigger rights in the UK, because boxing can pull in big audiences for big nights, but it's a niche sport week in, week out, and there's no shame in saying that. That's just a fact. It's a very well supported, kind of loyally followed niche sport, but that's what it is. So I just think it's difficult, and it'll take time. They're at the start of it at the moment, but what they are doing is putting on good shows. You couldn't say they're not putting on good shows. You couldn't say that the production of their coverage isn't good, because it is. I know all the people working on it, and they do a really, really good job. It's just a battle at the minute to get enough people to watch it. But again, I think that will just, there's no silver bullet for that. There's no short-term solution to that. I think that will just take time. But they've always said that they're in it for the long haul, DAZN, and they have kind of proved that, because it started in 2018 over in America, and they're still, they still seem as committed to it now as they were then.
Yeah, and I totally agree. It was Matthew that came out on your podcast and said, well, you obviously agreed that I think the football's such a main asset with boxing. Most football fans are generally most boxing fans as well. My dad, for example, is a massive football fan, and if it's not a Fury or AJ fight, he's not gonna look out to watch it. But if it's advertised on the football, then, and it's up straight after the football, like it generally is on a Saturday night, then he's one of those members of the audience that will watch it. So definitely agree with that sentiment as well.
It's convenience, isn't it, when it comes down to it? And that's another kind of problem that DAZN have got, which is that you've then got to get the app, download the app, pay for it, do all sorts of other things. And that is kind of second nature, definitely for somebody your age. Not quite so much for somebody my age, but still not too bad. But like for my parents' generation, or, not everybody's the same, obviously, but at the same time, it's just too much for some people. They can't be bothered. They don't really know how to do it. And they're not bothered enough, like you say, about watching whatever it is, that they're actually going to do that. But if all they've got to do is just not change the channel off the back of a Premier League game, then you're laughing, aren't you? And that's where Sky are, and they've been able to kind of slipstream into boxing off the back of football over the last few years. They put quite a lot on Sky Showcase this year. There's been a bit of a, not a feud exactly, but there's been the rivalry between Sky and Matchroom, with Matchroom having left. It's been there for all to see, hasn't it? Sky have put boxing on free to air, whether it's online or on Sky Showcase, quite often got massive figures, and then wasted no time in kind of putting them out into the public sphere, which is fair enough. That kind of thing was always going to happen.
We love that though, don't we? We love that a little bit, don't we? We love the rivalries between the broadcast and the promoters. We love all that. But just two more. I know, conscious of the time, but just two more before we leave. Who's got the best stable at the moment leading into 2023?
It's an interesting one, that, because I think, if you go back again, it's only like 16 months. If you go back to the kind of the start of this new phase where it was a new phase for Sky, teaming up with Boxer, and a new phase for Matchroom teaming up with DAZN. As I said previously, Frank was steering a steady course with that BT partnership. At that stage, I would have said Matchroom had the best stable. They were number one. Queensberry were number two, and Boxer would have been number three. And I would have said that Boxer and Wasserman would have been fairly even at that stage. Maybe Wasserman even slightly ahead, right back at the very start. Now, if we're heading into the start of 2023, I think Matchroom probably do still have the best stable overall, but not by much. I mean, I think Queensberry have done a very solid job the last few years of bringing through fighters. You look at somebody like McCann, but it's not just fighters like that. Someone like Noakes, Sam Noakes. I like him. You look at the lads you look at Nick Ball and the lads from Everton Red Triangle. They've got Denzel Bentley, did well in his world title fight, and then he's got heavyweights. Fury, Joyce, Dubois, just signed Enrico Italma, who's 17, 18 years old. That is, they would say that they've got the best stable, and you could provide a solid argument for that. And a lot of it would be based around those heavyweights. So I would say it's very close between those two. And I'm almost convincing myself there as I go through it that maybe it's Queensberry. they've both got stronger stables than Boxer currently, I would say. But Boxer, I think, have made some good additions, and in the amount of time they've been going, I think have done pretty well. Yeah, I think have done pretty well. But yeah, like you say, with rivalries are good. Whatever part of the business you're in, rivalries are definitely good. It was interesting to hear Eddie say, well, Boxer have come in and they've kind of distorted the market by overpaying for stuff, and he was talking about Olympians there basically. I think Fraser Clarke and Karasati still, Lauren Price, Ben Whitaker. But that's what you do when you're new, isn't it? And that's what he did in America, and that's exactly what Bob Arum criticised him for in America a few weeks ago. So these things are they're all kind of circular in a way. But I do think next year it might just have to settle down a bit. It might just have to settle down a bit, and people might have to look to balance books a bit more.
Well, Andy, then, what do you want to see in 2023 before we finish off, Andy?
The thing I most want to see is Fury Usyk. I think okay. That I don't see why that can't happen, because you look at the people involved in it, Top Rank, Queensbury, K2, they've done loads of business. They're very experienced. They get on. They know how to get things done. And everybody wants that to happen. As far as I'm aware, everybody wants it to happen. So I just really want to see that, because I think boxing needs it. I think the division needs it, because other people need to get opportunities. I really want to see someone like Joyce get an opportunity, not just because he's British, but just because he's gone about things exactly the right way. And the 4 belts have been on lockdown between 2 people for a long time now. We've had plenty of rematches, all that kind of stuff. And the benefit of having 4 belts, and not everybody likes it, but the benefit is that you should get quite a lot of world title fights. So I think get undisputed. Whoever wins that, they're the man. They don't even really need the belts at that point. They're bigger than the belts. They're not going to want to fulfill whatever mandatories they'll get slapped with, and the whole situation will probably change. And I think it'd be good. It'd be good if it did.
Andy, you've been a pleasure all year. Thanks for the Boxing Social, mate. And enjoy your Christmas, New Year. We'll catch up in 2023.